Today's living lesson is a redo. When I recorded it the first time, something happened. I started losing sound on my headset, and then eventually you couldn't hear it. I think that was the stage that the other one was recorded, but this is take two. And usually, almost always, maybe always, if I have to redo something, if I lose something, meaning I write something up or some catastrophe happens, and you just get so weak from it and you want to just give up. Sometimes you get to that point that you want to cry because you spent so much time on a project. Inevitably, every time, I really can't remember a time that I didn't come back, and because of that state of brokenness, my husband created something so much better. It's always so much better. It still is painful or exhausting, or, you just feel so broken from it because, in fact, we are human. And that is what's going to happen. If we didn't feel those things, we wouldn't be human. And if we didn't feel those things, how could we minister to others and understand others? So don't let anything or anyone tell you you need to be above all of that, because it's simply not true. So let me get into what is this whole thing. It's based on the scripture, the promise. Maybe it's more of a principle than a promise, but it says, the mind of man plans his way, but God directs his step. Now, anytime I have a promise or a principle, anything that I've read, memorized, it takes on whole new meaning all over the course. It could happen from day to day, moment to moment. In this particular case, what my husband was setting out to do is kind of change the way that I've been doing things. And I think all of us can relate to that. It's a way of taking us outside of our comfort zone, because when we become comfortable, it's kind of like we become lukewarm, isn't it? I'd rather you hot or cold, but because you're lukewarm, I'm going to spew you out of my mouth. That comfortable state means we're not dependent on him. If we're too hot, we need him. If we're too cold, we need him. He wants to be needed, because apart from him, we can do nothing. So in this state, what he was trying to do is to have me depend on him a lot more. And I think, just now that I'm thinking of it, and I trust that it's from him, that he knew I was going to have a lot of opposition and a lot of things that would run contrary to don't do this. And this opposition is to kind of throw me off of wow, in so many ways, it's just miraculous what's happened within the ministry. But let me take you back that I did live like this for a short period of time. Well, it was longer than anyone would have imagined. But years ago, I was at the stage where I had no idea, no plans whatsoever. Instead, he just directed my paths. And it got to, and I always use the one instance because to me, and that's where my husband brings me back, if I'm ever starting to pull back or think, oh my gosh, can I really do this? Am I really going to do this? He brings me back to a train station. I believe it was in Lyon, France. And I was sitting in the train station. Maybe it was someplace else. I don't want to say where I was, but I was sitting in the train station. And this didn't happen once. It happened over and over again. I would get up, I would wake up, I'd have my coffee, maybe I'd have breakfast, but inevitably my husband would lead me to the train station, and I would sit at the train station. I would wait until he told me to get on that train. And I had no idea where I was going, how far I was going to go, when I was going to get off, where I was going to stay. And this one instance, I was sitting at the train and I was waiting, and he said, "Get on this train." And so I looked, and I was looking both ways. I looked up on, they have like a marquee there, and I thought, which train? There wasn't even one coming. And then one pulled up behind me. I was even facing the wrong track. So instead of going, I don't know, north, I was going to go south, or if I was going to go east, I was going to go west. And I hopped on that train, not knowing where I was going. Some people, this is exciting. People live like this. Some people backpack. This is just not my nature. And so taking us out of what we're used to, the nature and the way God created us. Some of us are very organized, very planned, very meticulous. Then there are others that are artistic, they flow. They're the type that would backpack, and they would think, oh, that's the most exciting thing. Some people say it until they have to do it, but I am definitely not that way. Also, it's not like I was a teenager doing this. I was a grown woman. I was an adult. I don't know if I was a grandmother yet. I probably wasn't. I don't know. It doesn't really matter, but just trust me, this is not my way. And so I did live like this. Now, another thing that I used to live by all the time was I would envision something, and literally I could see something and I knew the path I was taking. He would show me and I would follow that, almost as if he drew out a map ahead of time and sent me directions, but I could see it. And I think the peak of that, and to the heightened part of that, is that one point I even saw like my son and daughter-in-law, and I called them and said, "Are you at this particular store?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "What aisle are you on?" And they told me, and I said, "Go to this other aisle." And I said, "You're going to see this comforter." And I believe it was for either my daughter Tara or my two daughters, I'm not sure. And they said, "We don't see that." And then I said, "Turn around," and they could see it. Now, this is pretty crazy stuff, but I promise you it actually happened. Now, I have never reached that height again. I don't think I need to. It was just that time that my husband needed me to have that, to remind me of things like this. But all of this has been thrown away. And instead, the way that I have been living is that I don't plan. I just skip that part. The mind of man plans this way. Now, naturally, my mind starts to plan things. That is our human nature. If you're that type of organizing, you plan it, you're going to do this, that, or the other thing, and then you'll do this and you'll do that. But as soon as I realize my mind is planning it, it just makes me tired, because I know that's not probably going to even happen. And so it happened just before I recorded this. And why I'm recording this one again is because this morning I woke up assuming that I was going to go to my P.O. box. And it's not as easy as just jump in the car, because I don't have a car. I have to do the Uber. There's so many little details. Besides, I was working. My sister is in the midst of, she was in surgery at the time. I didn't know if I was going to wait until she was out. All these things. But even though my mind kept trying to plan, I just let it go, because what I want is to be able to just be surprised and just trust him and go from one thing to another to another. And it's amazing. It just was beautifully done the way it happened. I even had a Uber driver cancel on me. At the last minute, they asked if you have any notes, and I sent a note, and instantly they canceled. And I thought, that's interesting. And then another Uber driver comes, and it's someone I knew. I've ridden with him before, and that was an ordained experience. Not going to share why now, but it was. And so he took me there. He waited for me. He brought me back. Everything was just beautifully done. Even when I was in the post office, I ran into somebody that I had been ministering to long time ago, and she was there and we had this great conversation. It's just, that's the way that he wants me to live. And it's not in my physical living is something to prepare me for the ministering things. And if you, I don't know when you're listening to this, if this is new and it's live, you know, all the crazy changes that have happened within the ministry. But I could not have done that or felt comfortable doing it if I hadn't lived it in my own physical life. And there's no amount of reasoning and trying to understand anything until you do what he asks you to do. So I don't know where you are on your journey. We go through different periods of time. At one point, when I was thinking even about recording this, I thought, I started to say in my head, because you do plan these things, that I was going to say, I'm moving up to a higher level of trusting him. I don't know this is any higher. Maybe that envisioning was higher. And this is rudimentary, or it's the beginning phases. And I missed that part, sometimes in school, you may have missed parts, like I didn't do that and I didn't learn that, I missed a lot of things because if you've read any of the children's books, I missed things because I sat out in the hall a lot. I was set apart out in the hall. And so you don't learn a lot if you're in the hall, especially if your teacher shuts the door. And so you don't hear anything. And so I missed some things. So maybe this is something that should have been done a long time ago, and he's bringing me to it. Maybe it's higher. It really doesn't matter. It's just a new phase that I'm going through. But again, the promise, the principle, the mind of man plans his way, but God directs his step. And when I first knew that one, it was a comfort to me. I might plan things out and I might think, but ultimately, I don't have to worry. I'm planning and I'm going to do it the wrong way, or I'm going to be misled. Instead, he'll direct your paths. So if that's where you are and that's what you want to think of in this promise, then do it, because it applies to that as well. So I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope that you will take time to sit and talk to your husband about it. And if you do, or you have anything that you want to share, especially things that you've come through, please share it in a comment. And thank you for listening.